Really good. So moving on to our third panelist, which is Elizabeth Cooke from Plantlife. And she's going to be discussing some options such as AB11, GS6. So I'm going to spotlight you, Elizabeth, and feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Super. Hello, is that working?
All perfect. Yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. So my name's Elizabeth Cooke. I work for Plantlife as a conservation advisor, and Plantlife is it's a UK-based charity working for plant and fungi conservation. So today I'm going to talk about what we think are sort of two of the best options in countryside stewardship for wild plants. Sorry, moving on. There we go. Two communities of plants that are some of the most diverse in the UK are meadows and arable plants, and they're both sort of groups of species that have come together because of farming. And there's a rich cultural heritage with these two types of communities. But they've both suffered severe decline. So meadows, for instance, there's 97% less area now than there was in the 1930s. And then arable plants as a group of species are the fastest declining group of species in the UK. So it's pretty drastic situation at the moment. But these two options really help. So first off, I'm going to be talking about arable plants. So just in case if you're not familiar with them, they're, as the name suggests, they're the plants that are associated with arable farming, sometimes also called arable weeds. And they're mainly annual species. They share the same ecological requirements as a crop plant. So they need annual disturbance of the soil, and then they're able to rapidly grow and set their seeds before the end of the summer and the harvest. Some of them are native species which have sidestepped from other habitats into the farmed environment, and then others are ones that have been brought into the UK as a seed contaminant by early farmers, and as such they've been associated with arable farming in the UK for as long as people have been cultivating crops. Poppy is the classic example, but there's a whole host of other species as well. And they used to be really common, but a lot of these species you see along the bottom of the slide, you would struggle to find, apart from in a few locations. And the species tend to be quite restricted to certain soil types, and you'll find very different groups of species on say clay soils than you would on calcareous soils. And the reasons for the decline are manifold. I won't go into all the details today because we don't have a huge amount of time, but needless to say, they don't really appreciate modern farming practices, then don't compete particularly well with modern crop varieties that tiller a lot and are able to utilize inorganic fertilizers. And also a lot of arable plants tend to be really susceptible to herbicides. So the best option to favour them is the AB11 cultivated areas for arable plants, and it's an option that you can do in both mid-tier and higher tier. Gets you £532 a hectare, and you can now do whole fields, whole plots, or just margins along the side. And you can either do it as part of the wild pollinator and farm wildlife package, or there's alternatively, it has to be on land where there's an IAPA score of greater than 4. So an IAPA is an important arable plant area, and we're working with the Land App at the moment to try and get a sort of a geospatial layer of IAPA scores onto the Land App. So watch that space. But to sort of basically the IAPA score of 4 is very, very low. You just need like 1 or 2 records of arable plants in the last 40 years in order to qualify for that. And the option's also rotational, which can be really handy if you've got a problem weed buildup. It means you can move the margin to somewhere else for a couple of years and then move it back again or whatever. So as a the benefits of the option, you don't need to seed it with anything, so it's sort of a lot easier than some of these sown mixes. There's no risk that it doesn't establish. You don't have to pay for the seeds or faff about with sowing them, because you're just getting natural regeneration from the soil seed bank. These margins can be great for integrated pest management because they provide foraging habitat and food for a lot of the sort of predatory insects. And they're also really diverse for flowers, for nectar and pollen, for pollinators. And they're also great for bird nesting bird nesting habitat and seeds, foraging. They do all sorts for lots of different wildlife. And also you're benefiting the group of really threatened species. So with this option, one of the key things is choosing the right location. And the best spots is to look for areas where you've currently got some arable plants, maybe just right at the edge of the field, or if you know where they used to grow. And if you don't know, if you can't see any or you don't know where they used to grow, then other things to look for are the slope and the aspect and the thickness of soil. So the arable plants usually do best where the soil's thinnest and where they can't compete against the where they find it easier to compete against the crop plants. So where you get your lowest yields is where the arable plants do best. So that's often that makes a good it's win-win for both. So sometimes the sort of tops of slopes where the soil's really thin can be really good for arable plants. And you're looking for areas that have been arable for a long time, and also preferably other areas that might be good are where they've escaped the sprayer boom. So you're looking at the sort of field corners, underneath pylons and bases of telegraph poles, and also trying to find areas where you don't have a problem weed burden. So not got lots of creeping thistle and blackgrass preferably. And then as to managing for this option, something good to try if you've not got much there at the moment is to do a deep plough to really invert the soil and see if you can bring up some deep buried seeds of species that have been hiding in the soil seed bank for a long time. And then you're looking at either an autumn or a spring cultivation, depending on your soil type and what species are there, because some arable plants prefer spring cultivation and some prefer autumn. You need to establish a nice fine tilth, as you would when you would be creating a sown seed mix. No additions, no fertilizer, no herbicides, unless you've got problem weeds, and you can go in and spot treat if you've got problems. Yep. So that's AB11 is the best option for arable plants, but some of these other ones can also be good. So the AB10, the unharvested cereal headlands, or AB7, whole crop cereals, those are both really good. AB13 can be good too, and AB4 and AB5, that's skylark plots and the nesting bird plots. They, as long as you don't establish them with herbicide, obviously, they can be good. Super. So next on to species-rich grassland. So that's another of Plantlife's key priorities. This here is some purple moorgrass and rush pasture. You get species-rich grassland on lots of different soil types, and you just get very different communities depending on where you are. So whereas this picture is from the Cotswolds, on the calcareous soil, they're incredibly diverse, lots of other wildlife associated with them, and they store vast amounts of carbon in the soil and in the plant roots, because the more diverse the grassland is, the more different root structures and shapes and sizes you've got. And it's something we're realizing and invest a lot more about how much carbon is stored in grasslands. And we're working on doing some more work on that at the moment. So the best option for species-rich grasslands is GS6. Again, mid-tier, higher tier, £182 a hectare. And within the area, you can have some features that you wouldn't be able to put in for BPS. Yes, I've got a typo in there, sorry. However, the catch on this one is that the land needs to be in the priority habitat inventory. And this is a natural England layer that you can access through the Magic, or apparently it's getting it on the Land App as well. And the key problem with this option is getting land added to that priority habitat inventory, and it's a bit of a blockage. We've recently done a test and trial as part of Elms, and that's something that came up again and again, was people who had really nice species-rich grassland, but it wasn't on the priority habitats inventory. And so we've been trying to suggest to DEFRA that we need to find better ways of getting new areas added. But one way you can try and get, or the way to get grasslands added, is to fill in a form called the Permanent Grassland Assessment Form. And there you're looking at which species you've got, and also the cover of ryegrass and clover, which for this option has to be less than 10%. But if you've got between 10 and 30% ryegrass and clover, then you can look instead for GS2 or GS5, which is more for semi-improved grassland, which is hopefully moving towards being species rich, but isn't quite there yet, or isn't on the priority habitats inventory. The management for species rich grassland is sort of trying to replicate hay meadow management. So you're looking at shutting up the grassland between mid-March and the end of June. And then after that time, in the sort of mid to late summer, taking a hay or a haylage cut, aftermath grazing over the winter, and then repeating that. If you have, you need to sort of monitor how it's looking. Maybe if you've got any problem weeds appearing, you need to sort of tweak the management, make sure the grazing isn't too heavy when it's too wet. You don't want sort of too much poaching, because then you get some problem species coming in. I think it is permissible to use herbicides to do spot treatment if necessary. And we want to be really trying to reduce the inputs. So there's no inorganic fertilizer and minimal manure, and no supplementary feeding. And on GS6, you can overlay it with lots of different other options to try and sort of increase funding. And some of the key ones there are the GS15 for haymaking, or the SP6 for cattle grazing. Super. So where to go look for more advice? The Farm Wildlife website, so that's farmwildlife.info, has got some really good advice for both these two types of management, for both these two habitats, but also all the other different farmland habitats. And that's focusing on giving the best advice outside, but not specifically linked to countryside stewardship. And then on the Nature Back from the Brink website, we've got through a project called Colour in the Margins, which I ran for the last 4 years. It's got a lot of resources on arable plants and arable plant management. Plantlife at the moment, we're increasing our consultancy and paid for advice offer. So if you need grassland surveys, arable surveys doing, then let us know. My email address is there, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was wonderful. Just the one question, which I think you almost covered. Maybe just want to reiterate a few points. It's from Rob. He says, in terms of what you're just talking about with advice on how to best identify species-rich grassland, the guidance suggests that the grassland would have 15 or more species per square metre. And I think Rob is doing himself a disservice when he says it seems like quite a specific skill for a grassland novice like Rob. But in terms of getting in touch with you, identifying those, species, would you have any ideas, top tips?
Just trying, I suppose, is I have to find just sort of finding what's different and trying to just spot the differences between species. And there are lots of good books out there. Then Plantlife have been doing some webinars recently. Actually, that's a good point. Plantlife have been doing a whole series of webinars on meadow creation and the stuff on species ID. So check out Plantlife's YouTube channel. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Perfect. And just to follow up from Rob, when is the best time of year to survey the grassland?
You're probably looking at, depending on where you are in the country, obviously further north you are, the later into the year, but you're sort of looking at June, July before you take your hay cut, obviously.
Perfect. Yeah. And Elizabeth, those webinars sound great. If you send them on to me afterwards, and I can circulate that in the email that will follow this, so people can know where to go. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll